Okay, I've got 7 o'clock, so I'm start with a few announcements before we get into our class discussion. Remember, this Sunday, excuse me, is backpack to school breakfast. And it's this coming Sunday. There will not be any classes at 9 o'clock. There'll be gathering in the activities center for the adults to get with their backpack buddy. And if you are a backpack, I'm having trouble saying all that, backpack, how about BBP? How about that? How's that work? And you can't be here Sunday, please let Carolyn know. And Wednesday, the 28th, which is 2 weeks from today, will be the ice cream contest and dessert potluck, and that will be in conjunction with our singing that we are doing the last Wednesday night of each quarter. So we won't have class that night, so next week will be our last class in here. Don't hold your applause. Don't make me feel bad here. Anyway, so looking forward to that, and of course we'll have singing. Is singing first or ice cream first?
We're still debating.
Still debating. You might ought to make everybody sing first. Sing to earn your ice cream. Okay. Teachers, anyone who's interested in teaching this next quarter adult Bible class, please let Chris Van Wickle know. And if you're interested in teaching or helping in a children's Bible class, you can see Carolyn Prestridge. As far as we know, Jim Busby was going to be home. He is home. Okay, that's great news. And then Sue Myatt, she had eye surgery this week, so I'm sure she will not be here tonight. And then of course there's other events. We need to remember the Ellises and others that are having some long-term health issues. And if you saw Lewis's Pam Lewis, both their reports came back great, cancer-free, so that's great news on both him, her breast cancer and his prostate cancer, so that's great news. All right, so tonight, and remember I'll be watching for any comments that come through on the YouTube channel, and I haven't been very good at repeating questions so that our online audience can hear, but I'll work on that. I was gently prodded last week after class that I wasn't doing a very good job. You can figure out who did that. Anyway, tonight is Paul's prayer asking for his thorn in the flesh to be removed. It's a lot different. Paul is someone that you would expect if he made a request that it would be granted just based on his apostleship and the work that he had done and everything that he'd done in his life. And really, for his entire life, he was faithful even when he was faithful in not taught. He was faithful and honest with that. And when he was taught in Damascus, he learned better, and he was taught, and he became just as dedicated in the correct gospel as he was before he was taught. And so all of us here are familiar with Paul and his work and his reputation, and so it's a little bit different twist. You know, I always feel like I'm more like Jonah. I'm always saying, why are you doing this way? Or maybe Habakkuk. But Paul, it's hard to pick at Paul. There's not much we can pick out about him because he was so dedicated to the cause. But anyway, we'll talk about that. And the key verse is in 2 Corinthians 12, verse 8 and 9. I implored the Lord 3 times that it might leave me, and he has said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is perfected in weakness. Paul's ungranted request in the book that I refer to, All the Prayers of the Bible, this is one of those situations that really, as a believer, want to say, well, why wouldn't he? I mean, if anybody deserved it, you would think that Paul deserved it, that he deserved to have what he requested granted. And it's a perplexing question because we've all been in situations where we prayed about someone, or for ourselves, or whatever, and it didn't work out. And it didn't, and so we are left sometimes struggling with our faith, trying to see what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to react to this? And so Paul kind of gives us an example here. I've given you the reference of 1 Timothy chapter 1, verses 12 and 13. His past life before he became a Christian, before Ananias taught him, it weighed on him. And in his letter to Timothy, he brought that up, says, I was really bad. I was a blasphemer. And I received grace. I've given you the quote that every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. And that's, when you look at Paul, he did have a past. He really did have a past that he was ashamed about and regretted tremendously. And probably some of us, there's things in our past that we regret. We are not perfect. We are all sinners in God's eyes. And all of us, if we look honestly at ourselves, know that there are things in our past that we wished we would have handled differently. Now, I don't think anybody here was throwing people in prison and having them punished with a cat o' nine tails or anything that severe, but we've all been in situations that we look back and we think, I wished I would have handled that differently, and Paul was certainly one of those. And so this thorn, I want to go ahead and talk about the thorn, because just get that out of the way. The summation is we don't know, okay? We don't know, and it doesn't matter. But a few people offer their opinion. These are very well-educated Bible scholars. Adam Clarke thought it was just the distresses that he endured as his preaching. He got a lot of rejection, a lot of problems directed his way. Burton Kaufman thinks that it was that Paul could not get over how the Israelites completely rejected Jesus, even though at one time he was one of those Israelites. But that's Burton Kaufman's opinion. Albert Barnes thinks it was just his personal pride. The Gospel Advocate commentary thinks it's some physical ailment that was disfiguring, that was very obvious to people and would possibly make people not even want to look at him because of this disfigurement. Did you have your hand up, Ernest?
I thought it was like he had something like epilepsy or something.
We don't know. Well, that's one of the guesses that are out there. There is that. Now, there's several commenters pointed out Galatians 4, verses 13 through 15. But you know that it was because of a bodily illness that I preached the gospel to you the first time, and that which was a trial to you in my bodily condition, you did not despise or loathe, but you received me as an angel of God. And so some people refer to that it's got to be some kind of physical deformity, physical ailment. Maybe it was seizures. We don't know. Some people grasp at Galatians 6:11 where he talks about the large letters that he's writing. But basically, we don't know. There's nothing definitive out there. And the question I have, first question is it important for us to know that? No, it's really not. It's really not. The main thing for us to get out of this is something that really, really, really bothered Paul enough that he prayed about it to have it removed, whatever it was. And we don't know. And it's one of those questions when we're spending an eternity that we can ask and find out what it was, because we will all be raised perfect, in a perfect body, a perfect spiritual body. So anyway, I think the best way to start is to go back to what Paul says is the reason. And he gives that in the first 6 verses, and we'll look at those. Boasting is necessary, though it is not profitable. But I will go on to visions and revelations of the Lord. I know a man in Christ who 14 years ago, whether in the body I do not know, or out of the body I do not know, God knows. Such a man was caught up in the third heaven, and I know how such a man, whether in body or apart from the body, I do not know, God knows, was caught up into paradise and heard inexpressible words which a man is not permitted to speak. On behalf of such a man I will boast, but on my own behalf I will not boast, except in regard to my weaknesses. For if I do wish to boast, I will not be foolish, for I will be speaking the truth. But I refrain from this, so that no one will credit me with more than he sees or hears from me. And if you go back to the previous chapter, 11, his boasting really began there, if you want to use that term, boasting. And if you go back to verses 23 in chapter 11 and you go through, he talks about, in verse 24, he says, 5 times I've received 39 lashes, 3 times in verse 25 I was beaten with rods, once I was stoned, 3 times I was shipwrecked. And we just know about the one shipwreck. That's all we know in the book of Acts, but there was 2 other times that he was shipwrecked. A night and a day of spent in the deep, and he says he's been on journeys and dangers from rivers. And it's easy for us to kind of overlook this, but traveling long distances in this time period had danger. I mean, there wasn't a nice bridge to cross rivers. You just had to find a place and ford that thing, or maybe there was a bridge of some kind if it was traveled frequently, or maybe a little ferry. So traveling long distances, besides the bandits that might be out there, it was filled with hardship, and there wasn't Karen and I, we like to travel, and in the evening time, I'm looking for that Holiday Inn, I'm looking for that nice, cool, clean room. There wasn't that sort of thing back then. If they could find something, there was an inn maybe. But anyway, so why did Paul feel the need to boast about himself, do this boasting? Why do you think he felt the need that he needed to do that? He did. He had a lot of people trying to discredit, did you say? To discredit him. Why were they trying to discredit him, Chad? What do you think? The Gentiles. I mean, there were a lot of people that didn't care for him, right? Yes. Why else would he feel the need to boast? Not like the yeah. His bona fides, I like that. I mean, he didn't travel with the Lord as like the other apostles did, right? So it's a good point. Karen, I thought someone over here made a comment. Okay. In his mind, anyway, he had a lot to prove. He didn't travel with the original apostles. He wasn't present with Christ during his ministry, besides the fact that he persecuted the church tremendously. I mean, he was there when Stephen was executed. He was part of that mob that was executing Stephen. So you know that none of that ever left his mind. Okay, then in verse 2 and 4 he talks about a third heaven and paradise. It's interesting to read Brotherhood commentaries, because even on something like this, they have their disagreements. The Gospel Advocate commentary thinks they're both the same place, and Burton Kaufman says emphatically, no, they're not. There were 2 different events. Does it matter? Does it really matter? It was a tremendous event in Paul's life. Now, the third heaven is felt to be the dwelling place of God. That's what the Jews thought. That's where God himself, the throne, when Stephen looked up into heaven and saw Jesus standing next to God, that was the third heaven. Paradise is often something different, a holding place for the dead. When the rich man and Lazarus died, where was Lazarus? When he opened his eyes, where was he? Paradise. And we won't talk about where the rich man was, right? So, anyway, so you've got all that going on. It doesn't, again, I don't think it matters. Then he says, inexpressible words which man is not permitted to speak. Why wouldn't he be permitted to say what he saw up there? Why wouldn't he be permitted to say that? He said he wasn't permitted. Why is that? How many times did Daniel tell us what he saw? How many times did John, when he was on the Isle of Patmos, tell us what he saw? And others. Why wasn't Paul permitted to speak about what he saw? I think the exact words which a man is not permitted to speak. Why would that be? That he saw things that other people what? Did not see? Okay. That's as good an explanation as, Patsy, I think that's as good an explanation as there is. One commenter suggested that he wanted people to talk about his life and his actions. If he's the only guy that saw this, everybody could say, nah, and just say, nah, you didn't see that. I don't know, that's kind of an odd speculation there, but
This translation that you use says the words are inexpressible, so we wouldn't understand them anyway.
exactly. And that's what I would lean towards. That he said they were inexpressible words, so we wouldn't understand them anyway. And illegal, not lawful. Who told him that? Who told him that he couldn't? Again, we're kind of ventured into the world of speculation, and that's fine as long as we know we're speculating. I lean towards that it was something that was indescribable in human terms, so the Lord didn't want him to try to communicate that. That wasn't the purpose of this vision. And that's the only thing that makes sense to me, that he's seeing something for him. This is for Paul to encourage. 14 years ago, this is early in his ministry. This happened 14 years ago, so it's early in his ministry. And to me, it sounds like this is something to encourage Paul and to build him up and to say, this is what it's all about. This is the goal. This is what we're headed for. Where other people, Daniel, for example, and the Apostle John on the Isle of Patmos, what was he told at the first? Write this down. He's told, write this down. And there's only really one reason to write it down. That's so other people see it. So there was a different purpose. And, I don't want to get off into the book of Revelation, but that was to encourage the Christians of that day that there was persecution coming and they would overcome. That's it in way condensed version of the book of Revelation. So it had a different purpose. I'm thinking that this purpose for Paul was for him, and so this is why that he was told no. Plus the fact, do all those visions in Revelation make sense? Do we really, I read that, and I've spent my time studying the book of Revelation. I'm reading that, and I'm going, it's got how many heads and how many wings and fire coming out and all. And I know that John is inspired, and he is trying to put it in, take something that's infinite, that's spiritual, and try to describe it in a finite language, which I think is probably impossible to get the full impact of that and the images that Daniel saw. So anyway, that's what I'm thinking. Does it make sense to you guys? Anybody want to weigh in with a different idea, different thought?
There was one thing in Revelation that got my attention.
What's that?
Behold, the pale horse. On the horse was dead.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Watch out for a pale horse coming down Summers Avenue, right? Okay. All right. This vision, point number 6 on your handout, this vision was an amazing event in Paul's life, setting him apart from others and could make him prideful, which he's going to kind of allude to next. All right. When I was studying, preparing this, I thought about the Mount of Transfiguration. Who was there? Peter, James, and John. Only them. Only them. And who did they see? Jesus. Who? Moses and Elijah. People that had been dead long ago. An amazing event. And what did Jesus say to those 3 guys when that was over? Don't tell anybody. Not until after the kingdom is established. Because that was an amazing event for them to encourage them. For whatever reason, Jesus felt like he needed to do that for those 3. He did. But then he said, don't tell anybody. There are other times that Jesus, when he heals someone, he said, don't tell anybody. I mean, like, if you were crippled or blind or whatever, and suddenly you can see, it's not like people notice. I mean, they're not completely oblivious to what's going on. Okay, so verse 7 tells us, because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations, for this reason, to keep me from exalting myself, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me, to keep me from exalting myself. So there's the reason why. Concerning this, I implored the Lord 3 times that it might leave me. And he has said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is perfected in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, I will rather boast about my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. Therefore, I am well content with weaknesses, with insults, with distresses, with persecutions, with difficulties for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. So, Paul's stated reason for this is because I saw this amazing stuff that nobody else was there. I got this thorn in the flesh to keep me from being full of myself, basically. All right. Paul did have concerns about pride in 1 Corinthians 9, verse 26 through 27. He talked about, in verse 27, he said, I think the King James says, buffet my body. Here he says, I had to discipline my body. What is that all about? How do we discipline ourselves? Paul said he had to discipline his body. How do we do that? How do I discipline my body? How do you discipline yourself? I can stand here a long time. You do things that you don't want to do. Or you don't. Yes. Straight from the book of James, right? You do things you don't want to do, or you don't do things that you want to do. I like that. I like that. It is, isn't it? It's constant. I mean, I am not a morning person. Sunday morning services I just struggle to get up and get going. I've always been that way. Some of you folks that work shift work, the 3 to 11 shift or the 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. shift was perfect for me. Perfect. Marla, can you identify? Yes. It's perfect. Besides the fact that all the bosses are gone, right? Yes. You look, 5 o'clock, everybody leaving, we can just do our thing here. No comment, Brandy? But that's when we worship, right? It's the time we get together. We do, and that's just minor. That's just minor stuff. How many times have we been going to see somebody, going to do something, go check on somebody, and just go, you know, it's hot outside. I'd just rather stay home in the AC, and that's it. And I'll see if they're there Sunday or not. Right? I mean, are we going to be honest with ourselves? I mean, I've been there. Or it's cold. Of course, I'd much rather go out in the cold than go out in this. But there's things that we know. Yeah, Mark, you're with me. I mean, summer's my least favorite. But anyway, so there's things we know we should do, and we tell ourselves, we say, I got to be an adult, I got to grow up, got to do it, and there's things that we don't want to. Ernest, your hand's doing.
As a Christian, you know, you get used to thinking about what the consequences of your actions will be.
As a Christian, you think about what the consequences of your actions would be.
If you do what you're supposed to do, or if you don't do what you're supposed to do, then there's going to be consequences. Is that the right motivation? I'm just putting you on the spot, aren't I? Yeah. Is that a good motivation? When it comes to sin,
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say it's a pretty good motivation to think about. I mean, we do that with getting our education, or even just going to work every day. There's consequences to all of those actions or inactions. And thinking about those things, yeah, you make a list. Here's what I got to do. Here's why. And so I do it. Or, Claudia, here's things I would like to do, but I'm not going to do because I know better. No, I shouldn't. Shouldn't be with those people. Whatever it is.
I remember when I was young, which I didn't think that was
Very few of us did, Ernest. That's part of the growing up and being young and being foolish sometimes. Yeah. So what did the thorn accomplish? What did this thorn accomplish?
when he was weak, he was strong.
Okay. What'd you say, Chad? Humility. Kept him in check. Not in just embarrass him and make him feel bad, just want to stay home. I mean, it was obviously something really. So he had to have maturity to kind of overcome that, didn't he?
Well, what he must have seen, and he remembers it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's, he had that in his mind. I mean, I know that this was humbling. What was wrong with him was, like Chad said, it kept him humble.
Right.
Knowing that and what his prize was going to be, I mean,
You think that's what kept him going?
probably not. That's got to be part of it.
Well, it's got to be, yes, absolutely. I mean, that's part of the consequences that Ernest was just talking about. Okay, this is the future for me to see, and it's a good reminder, isn't it? Okay, who sent this thing? This is a trick question. Who sent this thorn? Messenger of Satan. Did God allow it? And why would he do that?
That's the eternal question. We have to accept that God allows Satan to exist.
Yes.
That's a tough.
Pardon? Wait a minute. Pardon, Ernest? I mean, Chad, sorry. You're the one with hair. Sorry.
Testing of our faith brings about perfection.
Okay. Testing of our faith brings about perfection. Would you say perfection or completion? Okay. Now, I've given you two references. Go ahead, Ernest.
You mean to tell me he used the devil to fulfill his purpose?
He used the devil to fulfill his purpose. You know, I hadn't really thought of putting it that way, but we know that God used evil men to accomplish his will. So why wouldn't he use the devil to accomplish his will? That's a really good question, a really good thought. Now, I've given you the example of Job in Job chapter 2. And the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, he is in your power, only spare his life." So God allowed Satan to do a lot. And when you read the rest of all the sores and the things, and his family turned against his children were killed, but his wife turned against him. I mean, the person that he would count on being the closest to him, that she even turned against him. To me, one of the most interesting passages of Scripture in the New Testament is Luke 22, 31 and 32. And this is at the Last Supper. And the disciples are standing there with the Lord. And Jesus says this to Peter, "Simon, Simon, behold, Satan has demanded permission to sift you like wheat. But I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail, and you, once you have turned again, strengthen your brothers." Satan demanded of Christ to sift Peter like wheat. That's a pretty... If Satan could have turned Peter, what would he have accomplished? Who had the keys of the kingdom? Peter. Yeah. You just had to just throw it in. Are you the kid that always caused trouble in class? What? Who, me? Not you, right? To me, that's even a more dramatic statement than the conversation that God had with Satan about Job. Peter, the writer records that Satan demanded. He said, I want him. I want him. This messenger of Satan also came after Paul. Does Satan look for the weak link in our life to say, this is where I'm going, right here about this person, right there? That's their weak spot. Was Peter, he was a pretty proud guy, wasn't he? He's one of the ones who stood up and said, even if they kill us. And Jesus, what did Jesus say? You're going to deny me 3 times. No, I will not. And he got sifted that night, didn't he? Like wheat. Yes. 1 Peter 5, yes. Yes, he did. And he experienced that personally, didn't he? Personal experience. He could speak to that. I think one of the messages we need to get from this whole lesson is Satan is real, and he is looking for our weak link, whatever it is, and he's out there looking. And if we are naive enough to think that he is not sitting in the pews next to us, we need to wake up, because this is where he needs to go to get us. And I'm not talking about y'all's wife back there in the corner. I saw that. Well, you're innocent, aren't you, David? He's sitting on the other side of you. Oh, it's them too. Okay. Okay. Now y'all have broken my whole chain of thought. I hope you're happy, because I do not know where I was. Do what? Devil. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Chad. Thank you. Why not? I mean, this is where the people are that are trying. The people that are at home and don't show up Sunday, he's got them. He don't need to spend any time on them. He's got them.
You know, Tommy, there are devices and things that we should do that he will have just, but I think sometimes when we're mourning or when we're sad or things going on with our kids, we're weak at that time.
Yes.
We're vulnerable and just any of them. Like it doesn't have to be a device.
Right. It's just, he's looking for the opportunities. That's good. Good point. So, I think we've established that it was allowed. God allowed it. He restrained it, just like He did in the Old Testament with the evil kings or whatever that He used. He only allowed them to do what He needed them to do. They were restrained for however He did that. I don't know, but I believe that He did. And you can look at what happened to Israel as compared to what happened to Judah to see that Israel just kind of disappeared from their captivity. They were never a pure race again, but Judah was. Why did Judah have to be preserved? The Messiah comes from that. Okay. And we talked a little bit about this when we talked about Esther. Okay, so could God have removed this thorn? Yes, He could. Yes, He could. And He's choosing not to. What does it mean when He says that the Lord's grace was sufficient? What does that mean? What does that mean, sufficient? It is what? Enough. Enough for what? Enough. Just enough. Okay. All we need? What does it say? Absolutely. And when I see that line here, Chad, I'm sorry. Oh, read that again.
Power is perfected in weakness.
Got it? If we accomplish whatever we accomplish on ourselves, who are we going to thank? Going to pat ourselves on, yeah. But if we are in the state where we recognize that it is only through God's power and grace that we are where we are and able to do what we do, we need to be constantly thankful. We should get up every morning, thank you for letting me start this day. Thank you for letting me be here to take care of my family. Thank you at the end of the day. Thank you for letting me have this day to take care of my family, to do whatever I did that day that hopefully was productive. Constantly. John. Looking at what? Okay. Satan knows. Does he know his limits? I think so. Now, he might push his limits. Now, I know none of your children ever pushed their limits with you. And you never pushed your limits with your mom or dad. Right. Even though we know their limits, sometimes we push those limits. And our life with kids kind of do that to us sometimes. So, in all things, thinking back and looking at our own personal Christianity, our own personal life, can we see things in our life that have been a trial to us, that we've had to endure, that it was just constant. And I'm not talking about your sibling that got on your nerves or anything like that. Like that. We all had those, right? But when we think back in our life, and number one, did we even pray about it? If there's something going on, did we even pray about whatever it is? Things aren't going well at work. Things aren't going well in the family. Whatever it is, afraid we're going to lose our job. All of those things make us. One of my favorite sayings is, "My good judgment is learned by the bad judgment that I exercised," because at least you go, "I did that once, and I know better than to do it again because I did that once and it didn't work out." There's someone that I used to work with. She was a real character, and you'd do something, and she'd go, "How'd that work out for you?" Sometimes we've got to do that. So, all right. So why was Paul given the thorn? To bring it all home. Why was he given the thorn? To keep him from boasting, keep him from being prideful. Why is any Christian given thorns? Same thing, right? So is God really saying no? Is he really saying no to Paul?
Well, he offered him a solution.
He all. Yeah.
It's not like he said, forget it.
Ernest, you're on fire tonight. He did give him an alternative, didn't he? I'm not going to do this, but this. I like that. Pardon? A good parent. You mean the alternative is do it or I'm going to beat you? No, that's not. Yes. When I think about that question, I think, was it really just a straight, it wasn't just a straight no, deal with it because I said so. It wasn't that. He reminded him of the grace that he had been given and the grace that's available. And certainly, I want the grace. I know you want the grace and the mercy that goes with it. Chad? It's still a no.
He gave him a way to get, just like 1 Corinthians 10:13, that every temptation God will provide a way to escape, right? It's eternity. Again, he's reminded Paul the same thing that Paul wrote then.
He still had the thorn.
My grace will save you. That's why it's sufficient.
Yeah.
Because that equates to your salvation. But as far as his thorn in the flesh,
He still had it, didn't he? And yes, been short. All right. Well, the class is over. I've made all the points that I was hoping to get, and there's been some great comments, and I appreciate it. Next week will be a different twist. Paul deserved to be heard, didn't he? He deserved to be heard. He was a faithful Christian. You might say he had earned it, but none of us really earn it. But he was a faithful Christian, and so yes, God is going to listen to him. If we are faithful, God is going to listen to what we have to say. Next week is people going to be asking and also not getting, but it's a different spin in James chapter 4. So I appreciate the comments and the questions that you've had. David. Oh, it's my bag. No. It's a thorn in my bag. Yeah. David needs some help to arrange furnishing in the activity center for Sunday morning, right? Okay.
David, my grace is sufficient for you.
He'll show you a thorn. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.